Okay, well, let's get started. I am so glad everybody's here, and today we're going to make stock. And some people call it broth, some people call it bone broth. There are all these different names for it. But basically what it is the clear part of chicken noodle soup. It's just the most wonderful way of upping your game as a cook that I can think of. It's one thing that will add what the French call flavor layers, so that like typically food tastes really good when you have a lot of distinct flavor layers that all work together really well. And stock is the best way of doing that for all sorts of things. It's the base for soups. It's a base for sauces. It's a way of, if you've ever heard the term deglazing a pan, where you just put a little liquid into a pan, like after you make a pork chop or something, you put in a little stock. After that, boil it, strain it, and you've got a sauce. And no calories, it's just a sauce. But what it is the simplest thing in the world. Stock is using the parts of the chicken it's using the bones. It's
okay. The stuff you're gonna. So I'm seeing other people.
Oh, you are?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's trying
So welcome everybody. This will all be on YouTube so you can see it. But the thing I love about stock is you always throw away all these chicken bones and just think, oh, this is junk. But it is what you make the most delicious thing in the world.
So she's going to repeat.
So here is what's in stock.
Let me try it.
It's bones. So we've got bones and onions and celery and water. That's all that's in it. You add salt later. What I do, you think, oh, I never get this many bones.
Join a meeting or sign in. Can you resend the link?
This is probably 4 chickens worth of bones. 5 chickens, four chickens at least. But what I do is every time we have chicken, I throw the bones in this bag that's in the freezer. I just keep it in the freezer, and every time, if I just have 4 chicken wings or 2 thigh bones or something, I just throw them in here. And after 3 or 4 months, they're enough to make stock. So here's how we're going to make stock. This is so easy. You have onions that are cut into 4 pieces, and you skin them and cut them into 4 pieces. Washed celery that you cut into chunks, doesn't really matter how big they are. This is how hard it is to make stock. It's easy.
It's white onion.
Celery.
Gay, you're using white onions?
Onion, doesn't matter. Just onions. Yeah, white onions, yellow onions. And here are the bones. Just all these bones. And you just pour them into the pot and add water.
Does the water amount matter? The amount of water matter?
I can't hear, so just a second. Just watch and I'll be back for questions. Okay, so here, look at all this. There's all this stuff in there. Now I add water. So I just fill it up. And look, here's a little elastic thing. It was on one of the chickens. I'm going to take that off. I throw it in a little too quickly, don't I? The rubber band won't add a lot of flavor. This is turning into a wrestling match between the rubber band and me. Can you hold that? Thank you, love. Perfect. Okay. But see, and here I had, it's just little bits of meat on there. You don't have to worry about taking the meat off. It's great. And these are my flawlessly clean hands that I washed. You also don't have to worry too much about germs because this is going to simmer for many, many hours. And you can put in raw bones, you can put in cooked bones. I use the bones after dinner. So and because you're going to simmer it for 20 hours, 18 hours, a long time. And there's nothing, no germs are going to live through that. So you don't have to worry. And if I have sauce on the meat, I rinse it off. If it's really like hot, spicy sauce or barbecue sauce or something, I tend not to use those bones. But other than that, anything else I do. If there are stuffings inside the chicken, you just don't want to get it. You don't want to include a lot of those because they can have taste that you don't want in it. Now, a lot of recipes for stock, and this is a difference, and it's very heavy. You can also add the water if the pot's too heavy for you, just bring the water to the pot. And I'm going to put it on high.
Yeah, how big is your pot? How big is that pot?
Oh, it's enormous. This is a 35-year-old pot of mine. I don't even know. I mean, 30 quarts or something. It's big.
Yeah, a little bigger than my 6 or 8 ounce quart thing.
And an 8-quart one is pretty little for making stock, but it'll just make less stock, and that's fine. It's more manageable. So here's this, and I'm going to cover it. And what we're going to do is we're going to let it get to a simmer until what'll happen is it'll start getting a little foam on top. And what you want to do is we'll skim the foam off because that is any impurities that are inside the bone marrow will come out. And this is the big reason that I always, always, always use organic chickens, because non-organic chickens tend to have more stuff in the bones, and you see it when it comes out. It's not so bad with chicken bones, but with beef or something, it's really dramatic how nasty the stuff is inside the bone marrow. So use grain-fed, good beef for beef stock. It's better. Here's the deal. You only use carrots and onions, and I will put in a couple of bay leaves and thyme after I've done the skimming, which takes about 15 minutes. And you'll see all that. But I'll just put in like 3 bay leaves for this big pot, because this will make a lot of stock. So there are all these bay leaves, and that's all the flavor you want in it. Sometimes you'll see recipes for stock, and they have garlic and salt and carrots. I would never use carrots because they're so sweet that even a couple of carrots will make all the stock taste sweet. And what you want is your stock to be completely meat flavor and nothing else, because that way then when you're cooking you can decide how you're going to use it, because you can use it for so many different things, and you might not want garlic in that soup or that sauce you're going to use it for. So just make it the blandest thing, and you really don't want to put salt in it because when you're cooking it, because if you do and you reduce it a lot, you can have a sauce or a reduction or something that's way too salty, and you don't want that. So add the salt later when you're making what you're going to make with it. So you just want this very bland thing. So this will take a little while. Does anybody have any questions right now? Before we do the end part, because what's going to happen with this is, here are the stages. We just started it, and I would start it like on a morning like this, and then I would go ahead and cook it all day and all night, and tomorrow morning I would have the most gorgeous stock you've ever seen. So you cook it the whole time. So what I'm going to show you now is what it looks like at the end and how to process it at the end, because really the only thing you need to do to it is what we just did here, and then skim the foam off for a few minutes, 15 minutes or something, and then at the end to strain it and take it out. But before we do the end, and here what I can show you is here is some stock that I made yesterday, and we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and show you how I do it at the end. But while we wait and do that for just a second, who has questions? Who wants to, who has any thoughts?
Where do I get a pot that big?
Commercial,
Yeah.
right?
You don't need a pot this big. I mean, here's one that I got. It's not quite as big. See this one? And you can get that online. Just look up stock pot. Another one that has, Le Creuset makes one that's very nice, and it's enamel coated. And I don't know, they cost about $100, something like that. Le Creuset, and you can get, blue ones with a white enamel inside, and those are very nice too. But I just look online. This one is all clad, and there it's fine. I like the Le Creuset one a little better. I have that up at the cabin, so. But basically,
Okay.
you need a pot. You just don't want anything that's going to be reactive, like aluminum.
Okay.
Okay, you have, so at this point to get it to skim, you have turned it on high to boil to get it to the point where you need to skim it, correct? You turned it on high. I think I heard that correctly.
Good point, exactly. So I put it up on high just so that it will come to a simmer quickly, and I'll keep checking it. But I'll just keep checking it. And then when it gets to the simmer, when it gets to the point where you can start skimming it, then I will turn it down to a simmer. You want it just at the smallest bubbly thing you can get, okay?
Do you also use cold water? Do you use warm water to make it quicker since it's going to be cooking 20 hours? Does it matter?
I use cold water because, there's that whole thing about you're always supposed to use cold water to start stuff because you don't want water that's been sitting in a water heater.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I just use cold water because of that. If you have instantaneous water that, heats it for you immediately, you could go ahead and use that if you want. But it's this process takes so long. I don't really worry about it, how long it takes to come to a boil, because this is an all-day process, and I have it going all night, so that's it. So here's one that I did, and I do have enough freezer bones to use it. And Russ, you can just do it from there. That's fine. You don't need to show me. This is so easy. So what I'm going to do is I have a bowl, and I have the pot with stock in it, and I've cooled it down, because what you want to do with stock is okay, so this is yesterday's stock. So tomorrow morning, this is what I'll do with this. I'll take it off the stove, I will put it in the sink, I stopper up the sink and fill the sink with cold water. And then I put the pot in the cold water, and with a lid almost all covering it so that bacteria can't fall on it, but you can get it will cool down, and it'll take about a half an hour, and you just change the cold water if you want to. But you want to cool it down as quickly as possible, because this is the best medium in the world for growing bacteria. It's like they use it in labs in petri dishes or something. It's really good for growing bacteria, so you want to cool it down instantaneously, get it into the refrigerator, get it into the freezer, so that you don't have any questions of, getting any germs in there, okay? So here it is, and this will not be quite as good stock, because what I did was I got 2 rotisserie chickens and boned them, and so it's not quite as many as bones as I have in that one. But what you do here, this is my really fancy, I brought this from France in my suitcase when I came back from France. This was such a big deal. I bought this at Julia Child's favorite hardware store cooking place. I mean, it looks like a hardware store, and you go down into the haunted basement and get stuff. Anyway, this is so cool. So I have an emotional attachment to this strainer. It's also very, very fine, but you can use any strainer you have. You can even use, like that. anything that will strain out stuff. So you get a big bowl, and I love this little thing. This is an OXO two cup thing, and it's measured for liquid, so you can look down and see the liquid level. But the cool thing about it for stock is you want to, you always simmer the stock and never boil it, because if you boil it, the fat emulsifies and it gets cloudy. But see how clear that is? And that's the way you want it. So there's a little oil on the top, there's a bunch of stuff, and there are all these herbs floating in it and everything. And then there are all the vegetables in the bottom and the bones. So I just run it through here and do it pretty gently so you're not bouncing it around too much. And I just strain it. And the neat thing about this is, you know, if you have to do something, you just stick it on the side, and you don't get the counter all gross and it doesn't get germy. And this way you're not lifting heavy pots and having bones splashing around all over your floor and your skirt. Not that I've worn a skirt in like 11 years, but still. Clothes. Okay, so here, you know, I'm just getting down to it, straining everything, and it's all going. Now, if I had a whole bunch of time, I would stick this in the space in the refrigerator. See, now we're really getting down to the bones and the chicken stuff. What I would do is, you can, if you want to, put it in the refrigerator for 5 or 6 hours, and any fat on the top will rise to the top and get hard, and you just pull it off. But I'll show you another way of doing that quickly. There's a little more in here, but I'm going to get it later because this is not that big a bowl. Okay, so I know that is great stock, and here is this. Now, there's a little film of fat on the top because there was some fat in the chicken. And, hold on, just one second, I need it. You get me a paper towels. What you do is you take a paper towel. This is any time you have fat on top of liquid. It's crazy. And it works really well. You take a paper towel, stick it on top, and the fat will stick to the paper towel, and it's off. Isn't that cool? It works. Okay, so this is now degreased, and it's all done. And so what I'd want to do is I put it in the freezer, and I double bag it, because I can guarantee you that no matter how great these freezer bags are, and these are quart freezer bags, no matter how good they are, one of them is going to leak and you'll have a disaster in the freezer, and it's just like, oh, I don't even go there. So I just double bag them. So I want 4 cups in each one. And this even measures it for me. So like 2 of those. Freeze it, get the air out. And then I have these labeled. Chicken stock 11/29/22. So I always know how old it is. And I can, you know, eat the older stuff first. And you just stick it in. But see how clear it is? And that's because you didn't boil it. So that's it, okay? And I put it here, and then I put the next one on top of that, and I just stagger them down like this. And I can get 2 rows, and everything will go on this cookie sheet, and I put it flat into the freezer. And then when they freeze, you can stand them up like this, and they're sort of flat, and you can stand them up and then sort of file them in little baskets. So I'll show you that at the end. But does anybody have any questions at this point about how you do this? Or what or why? No? Okay.
you, Gabe. Do you ever use the silicone ice cube trays to freeze smaller amounts?
Excellent idea. I don't do that, but other people do, and it's a great idea. You can freeze things in. Who had that brilliant idea? Who was that?
Oh, it was Julie. Yeah.
Julie, smart, smart, smart Julie. Yes. This is a wonderful thing. You can take like an old-fashioned ice cube tray or a silicone thing and make small amounts. And you make like basically ice cubes made out of these. And then you, they're made out of stock. And then you just throw it in to deglaze a pan. And it works really well. I tend to use a little more stock to deglaze a pan, so I tend to do most of them 4 cups, but then some I'll do like 1 cup or something.
Okay, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, because I was at the beginning. So could you just say one more time what you put in the chicken bones and just no salt and pepper? And
No salt or pepper, no garlic, no nothing. It's chicken bones, water, celery, salt, bay leaves. I mean, excuse me, no salt, no salt, no salt. Bay leaves, and at the end, after I've done the scooping the little foam off, then I'll put some thyme in.
but no onions? No onions?
Oh yeah, onions and celery. Onions, celery, water, and bones. That's basically
Okay.
what it is. And you flavor it with some bay leaves, and after we've done the scooping with the foam, we can add the thyme, which is great because you don't want to do it before you do the scooping of the foam, and it's about to get to this stage. You don't want to do it before because then you'll just scoop it right off and you'll lose
Well,
it.
if you were making this, for Thanksgiving with turkey, so what would you have used for the broth?
Exactly the same. So let's talk about that now. Brilliant, great question. You can use this. I'm showing you this with chicken stock, and because that's what we tend to eat the most, and it's also the most sort of the most ordinary thing to. It's a lovely taste, and it works so well with lots of stuff. Beef is a lot stronger, but you can make this with duck bones, pheasant bones, beef bones, anything. I mean, any bones you want, and vegetables. So that if any vegetarians, you do the same thing. You use the onions and celery, and then you can add whatever the vegetarian likes. For vegetables, I add a lot of mushrooms because mushrooms are great. Now, here's the big divide on stocks. There are 2 kinds of stocks that are, one is called white stocks and one is called the dark stocks. And the difference is if you want more color in the stock, you roast it. So what you do is you take just the bones, not the vegetables. But unless it's vegetable stock, then you do the vegetables. And you put it in a 450 oven, really hot oven, in that pot with the lid off in the oven for about 45 minutes. But really the test is when it starts smelling as if it's just getting that charred bird smell. You want to, suddenly it'll just start smelling fabulous. Go and look. You don't want it to burn, but you want it to get to the point where it's going to start, you want it brown, you want it bubbling and brown, and that will make the stock itself a darker brown. So if you want a darker color, or if it's a meat like beef or duck stock, it's really good to brown it. Okay? And vegetables, it's really good to brown. What else can anybody
Well, going back to Thanksgiving, okay. So what are you gonna buy? Do you use neck bones? Do you use
We just use
legs or?
everything that's left from the turkey. So Thanksgiving night, what we do is we go ahead and take all the meat off the carcass. We just take all the meat off the bones, throw the bones in the pot with the celery and the onions, and we end up with absolutely gorgeous stock the next morning, and then use that for risotto, and you can make it for all sorts of wonderful things. The other best use for stock, and especially like chicken stock or turkey stock, is to drink if you're feeling as if you're just about to get a cold. I mean, you can imagine how good it tastes to have plain stock. And I'm going to make a few stocks. This is what I do for, instead of the ice cube thing, just because I have this out, and I tend to use a little more than just an ice cube portion. I just freeze little ones like this. I just make a few that are smaller, and that way I have them for a sauce or something if I want to just throw it in. And I'm getting down to the end here, so I'm just going to pour this in.
Okay, may I ask another question? So if you're making the stock for Thanksgiving gravy, so in advance, you're going to possibly make a smaller amount. So what would you buy?
Okay, that's how you make duck stock if you're making duck à l'orange or something.
Okay.
If you don't have the duck bones, if you don't have duck broth, if you don't have turkey broth already, first of all, you can always use chicken broth to make your turkey gravy. Works perfectly. And our videographer can take this into the freezer now, but see what it looks like. Everything's there, it's all organized, and then Russ can just stick it, and he can put it flat on the freezer, and it'll freeze just like that. We're pretty soon getting to the point. Okay, so if you're making something and you want some quick stock, you always have, I always keep chicken stock in the freezer because it works, it's the perfect medium to pick up any other flavor. So if you're making bones, you can mix bones to make stock, and you can put chicken and beef, and it will taste absolutely like beef stock. It's just like chicken gets trumped by anything. It just automatically will pick up the flavor of anything else. So if you have chicken stock and you want to make a little duck broth, you can either just put in the duck neck or the turkey neck, which is great. Don't use the gizzards and all that stuff, because it'll taste like that. It'll taste like innards, and you really don't want that, unless you like that taste. But I wouldn't. But I would just, if I want to make turkey stock, you can either take chicken stock and simmer the turkey neck in it for an hour or two, a couple hours, with a bay leaf and a little thyme and maybe an onion and a piece of celery. I mean, that would just be wonderful, and you would end up with beautiful turkey broth ahead of time. Then after you've eaten the bird, then you take all the meat off and you just go ahead and do exactly what we did today with the chicken bones with the turkey carcass. And then you've got a whole bunch of turkey stock. I mean, you'll have a huge pot of turkey stock with the turkey carcass.
Good.
Okay, how much time, you said after you skim, then you'll add thyme to the stock. So you add 3 bay leaves. How much time approximately?
I would put in a little thing in the palm of your hand, just sort of cover the surface a little bit. I mean, a tablespoon maybe, like a tablespoon.
Small, okay.
Yeah, I mean, not a cup, but like a tablespoon would be good. It's just, and you want to be careful with stuff like parsley, because it ends up flavoring everything green. So you don't want to put, it's really fascinating. You don't want to put anything in there that's going to add too much flavor or color. You really want it to be very bland, just pure meat taste that you bring out in other ways.
And that is also approximately a tablespoon of dried thyme. You don't have to buy fresh, or do you use fresh?
No, just dried. I have dried, and that's what I'm going to put in. So I think we're getting to the point where we can start, you can start seeing the skimming is about to happen. And I'll show you what this is. It's very easy. It's not, it's still, it's a big pot of water. I mean, it just takes a while to get this warm. But you can see how it's starting. So you see, you start getting this little stuff. These are all organic bones, so they tend to not throw off very much stuff, and it's all white. It's just like a little bit of white stuff, and you just sort of skim this off. I think I'm going to get not a perforated spoon. I'll use a regular one. And you see little herbs in here, but it's probably a little thyme, a little rosemary from inside chickens. The other thing that I do is if I've roasted a chicken or something and I get bored with it and it's like I do not want to eat chicken one more night and there's still like a thigh and a leg in there, and I'll just throw that into the bone bag because it's never going to hurt to have a little more meat flavor in there, and it's not going to go bad. You know, a 4 or 5 day old chicken from the refrigerator is not going to be a bad chicken. It'll be a great chicken. So you use everything. That's one of the things the French always do, is they use everything. So
Okay, on the, so I unfortunately didn't hear at the beginning. So with a pot that size, how much bones did you put in there?
I had the bones up to about here, but you can have them to here. Like what this chicken stock that I just made, the bones were only up to about here, so it won't be quite as great as this chicken stock. But I had them to about here, and then I put the vegetables to about here. This one, we had the chicken bones to about here, and the vegetables to about here. I mean, it was a lot. It was a whole lot. So, and see, this is starting and it's continuing. But does that make sense?
Well, where did you get all the bones? I didn't get to hear that. Where did all those?
What we do is throw into a freezer bag that I keep in the freezer at all times. I just have a 2-gallon freezer bag, and I just start throwing bones in it. So every time we have chicken, I take all the bones, and at the end, off the dinner plates, rinse them off and throw them in the bone bag. And I keep them. So those are like, I've been saving those bones for like 4 months or something. And once, every 3 or 4 months, I have a lot of bones, and I say, okay, now I'm going to make stock. And so this will get me this will get me about 40 cups of stock.
So some of the bones obviously chicken had been cooked, but can you use it with chicken that hasn't been cooked?
Absolutely. So if you have a chicken that you get a whole chicken and you cut off the pieces and you have the back left, throw that in the bone bag. The only thing that doesn't go in the bone bag is when you have great big chickens, you don't want too much of the skin, because older chickens can have a slight fishy taste. American chickens don't tend to have a fishy taste, but I just don't put a lot of skin in, because it's only going to render out fat and not add a lot of taste. So I don't put much skin in, but I don't worry about picking it all out. Okay, let me show you next what we can do with the stock, because remember, I have like 6 of these in the freezer, and when I'm done with the stock, because you saw how it all got frozen, so what we do is I just put them like this, and this will be like, one will be chicken stock and one will be beef stock and one will be lentil soup and so. So okay, this first one, this is beef stock that I made in November. Okay, so that's all beef stock. This is French onion soup. This is, and it's made with either beef or chicken stock. Here is Greek lentil soup that is so delicious, and if anybody wants these recipes, I've written them out for the kids. But anyway, this Greek lentil soup is amazing. Here is beef velouté, which is just fabulous, and that's very, if you want to go really fancy French sauces, this is it, because it's like a cheese sauce, but you use beef stock instead of milk. So it's this lovely, or chicken. So Here is Lorenzo de Medici's chickpea soup, and that has chicken stock in it. Here is chicken noodle. Now, the way you make chicken noodle, here, I'll tell you that in a minute. Here's mushroom soup that you can do with beef. Here is 2 cups of strong browned duck stock. Okay, so that's duck stock. Then what I did was I took some duck stock and I made Julia Child's duck sauce, because if you're going to make it, it's a total pain, so you might as well make 4 times as much and then freeze it, and then if you have some duck breasts, you can throw them in and you suddenly have duck à l'orange without any trouble. So that's, I mean, everything gets really efficient when you use a freezer and do the stuff. Now here's the most fun, that is the new thing that I started doing, which is pho. Has anybody heard of Thai, you know, the Thai soup called pho, which sounds rude, but you're supposed to say it that way. Has anybody heard of pho?
No.
It's delicious. You can make it as spicy as you want, but this is the base of Thai soups. And I took turkey stock and I added these spices from one of our sons-in-law sent me these, this reluctant trading company, and they make pho spices, and you just simmer it for a couple of hours with the stock, and it is so good. It's just amazingly good. So there's that. And let me tell you how to make chicken noodle soup, okay? So we have our stock, and what I do is I take egg noodles, and I just buy egg noodles. I mean, if you want to make your own pasta, it's great, go ahead. And I've done that, but you don't need to, because you can get really wonderful egg noodles that are all made. And so you take the egg noodles and you just boil them until they're tender, quite tender. With I use half stock and half water, okay? Then at the end, when it's all cooked, and it's salted water, and so you do the egg noodles normally so they're cooked. And then when they're cooked, you throw out the cooking liquid, your half stock and half water. You throw it away because the flour from the noodles will have made it cloudy. And then what you do is you add to it, 3 or 4 packages of chicken stock, however many noodles you have. You add it to whatever thickness you want it. You add the stock to it, to the noodles, and then you throw in some chicken from a rotisserie chicken, and salt, and a little pepper, and that's it. Okay? And you do the same thing with chicken rice soup, except you can make chicken rice soup with like leftover Indian food rice, which is delicious, and you get basmati rice. You just add, and you don't cook the chicken at all, basically. You just throw, the chicken is already cooked, the stock is already done, the noodles are cooked separately, and you just combine them, and then use that, salt that, and then you freeze that. And that's all you need to do to make chicken stock and chicken noodle soup, and it's just wonderful. Okay?
Part again about throwing out the water stock.
What about it?
I was confused about after you've used half stock and half water that's salted, then you said it makes the noodles make some kind of foam or something. So you throw that out. Is that correct?
What the noodles do is the noodles always have a little flour coating on them. And so when you cook them, it makes the cooking liquid very cloudy. And if you want just absolutely beautiful, pristine tasting chicken noodle soup, what you do is you use you throw that out. Same with matzo balls. If you're making it, you can use matzo balls and cook the matzo balls in half stock and half water, and then drain that off, and then add the cooked matzo balls, add the cooked noodles, add the cooked rice to fresh stock and already cooked, like rotisserie chicken or chicken off of a roast chicken that you've made. And it's all, then everything will look the best, and it also will taste the best, because it won't have all the throw off of the noodles in the stock. It'll be perfect stock that you're doing. And then always season it, after you've done that cooking, because you know how much you're going to do.
Dave,
Hey, we're getting hungry.
Oh.
It sounds so good. I wanted to ask, I have,
Great, I was just
I have
checking.
a question. When you're buying the rotisserie chickens, how do you know if you're getting a good one, or I don't think they're labeled as organic, are they?
They actually are at Deerberg's,
good.
but
At
Deerberg's
Deerberg.
doesn't have the rotisserie chickens that are organic right now, and they won't for another till like early summer, he said, when they get the processing plant back up. But when you go to Deerberg's, they say bare natural on them.
Good.
I
Okay.
used to think it was bare naked, but it isn't. It's bare natural. So it's like, but bare something.
Yeah,
And just ask them. And I don't know what Schnucks does.
yeah, I'll ask them, yeah.
But this sounds strange question, but for the beef stock, do you use like steak bones or what do you use for the beef stock?
Anything. I use anything but spinal bones. So the best thing are like leg bones, and we got bones. You can actually get bones. We ended up buying, part of a cow about 3 years ago, and we're still eating it. But it's wonderful because that has bones in it, and I also asked him to keep the bones. And leg bones, hip bones, anything like that is great. There's this slight risk of mad cow through spinal bones that carry spinal neurological cells, and it doesn't cook out. Even cooking it for 24 hours, it doesn't cook out. So what you end up doing is you just don't use you don't use oxtail, you don't use any spinal bones. And anything else is fine, but if you can, see if you can get the grass-fed bones. And there is a place down in Maplewood that has really good grass-fed, non-antibiotic cows, and you can get that beef there, and you usually can buy bones from a butcher. So that's a good, and the critical piece about making it, I mean, from a standpoint of what you put in it, just to remember that anything that's not organic is just going to throw off a lot more of the foam that has some sort of gunky chemical stuff in it that you probably don't want to be eating. And so just be very, very careful to skim anything off that comes to the surface, because if you don't, after about an hour, it'll all reincorporate into the stock. So that's why when it comes up to the surface, you skim it off, and we can take another look at this now and see where it is. But you just keep skimming stuff off, and then as soon as the skimming is done, I'll add the thyme, and then just leave it covered and just check it every once in a while and make sure that it's just simmering. You just want this little disturbance of the surface, but you don't want a rapid boil. You can have a little boil, just little bubbles coming up, but you don't want it boiling, because that's what makes the fat emulsify in and makes the stock cloudy. Which is it tastes exactly the same. It's just a point of pride in France that you want clear stock. So that's,
You only need to skim once, correct?
you only need to skim it once?
Yes.
Yes, just at the beginning. So like basically the first hour you're sort of monitoring it, and then you just leave it, and check it every 3 or 4 hours. Check it before you go to bed, and I leave it on the lowest setting. I have one burner that has this perfect lowest setting that keeps it just at a lovely, gentle, tiny simmer all night. And then I wake up and it's all done, and I cool it down really quickly, and then do what you saw.
And Gay, for the beef bones, I assume that if you're getting like raw beef bones from the butcher, you can do your trick of putting them in the oven if you want a brown broth.
Yes, I always brown beef broth.
Okay.
Because it just, I don't know, it just adds this gorgeous color to it, and a lovely taste. It adds a flavor layer to it. So that's and you can do that with chicken bones. You can brown the chicken bones, and you'll get a more hearty stock. So if you want it sort of a browned chicken stock, you can do that. And it's a choice.
How long does that take to brown the bones?
About 45 minutes, something like that. So it's just at 440. You sort of go by smell. You want to do it until just before it burns. So just before you don't want to have like smoke roiling out of the oven. But other than that, it's a little charring is not a problem. It's pretty delicious. So.
Hey, do you do anything with ham? There's always leftover ham or ham bones.
Yeah, you could actually do that, and then you'd have ham, and you could make bean soup with it wonderfully. I mean, you could definitely do that, but ham and something that strongly flavored is only going to taste like ham. I mean, I guess the only thing I've ever done is like when I have a ham bone, I just tend at that point to just throw it in with some beans and make bean soup then.
Right.
And then I freeze the bean soup. So I don't think I've ever made ham stock, but you could. And let me tell you one other thing that the French do, and I don't tend to do this, but if you're short on freezer space, like if you don't have a freezer, and you really want stock, what you can do is simmer it down and you can take this much stock and just simmer it down to about this much stock. And after you've strained it, just simmer it all the way down. And it's incredibly, really, really, really intense. And then you can freeze it in small, half cups, 1 cup, and essentially it's 4 or 5 cups, and you just add water. You just reconstitute it. And you can do that. And the French do it so that they go all the way down to a jelly and cut it into squares and then reconstitute it. So it just makes storage space much more easy.
Okay, the name of the place in Maplewood, I have for you if you want it.
Yes, what is it, Nancy?
It's called Bollards, Bollards.
That's it. And they're really nice. And they make beef stock, but it's all cloudy because they're boiling it. It's not as good as ours is, you guys. Yours will be better. So just buy some bones from them.
So when you're putting the meat in the oven to brown it, no, it's just the bones, no water. It's just the bones.
Just the bones, exactly. And I don't put the vegetables in. I just put the bones in. And then I add the vegetables and the water to that. And then just be careful because it's an excruciatingly hot pot. So just be careful always to use your pot holders. Not just grab a handle or something, because that could be pretty bad. And you do that uncovered in the oven, okay? And at this time, I've covered the stock, and to have it come to the simmer, okay, here we can skim it again. And there just isn't going to be a whole lot of stuff, because these are organic bones, and there just isn't a whole lot. But we'll just go ahead and just skim a little more off. And you see we're starting to get a little simmer here going. And you just want to make sure that it's only simmering and it's not boiling. I'm going to say this is good enough and show you how much time to put in. Okay. So here's my time. See that? So, it would be like a tablespoon, maybe. Then I'll use the non-foamy spoon to stir it in a little bit. So see, we got a little more foam out. But basically, that's pretty done on the foaming. We're good. And at this point, now we just monitor it for the simmer till tomorrow morning. And you can take it out tonight if you want to, but if you let it go for 24 hours, it will be delicious. It's just, it will be the best it can be. So, okay. And that's it, and then I will just cover it, and then you have to monitor the simmer after you cover it, and I'm going to turn it down to simmer. And you just monitor it to make sure that it hasn't gone into a boil once, because now we're covering it, and this will be, that's it.
Hey, can you repeat the process about cooling it down so you don't get bacteria?
Yes, absolutely. So what you do is I come over here to my sink, and I stop up the sink and put the pot in and put in cold water. And I just like run cold water down the side of the pot, and I leave it about, 3/4 covered, half covered, something like that, 3/4 covered with the lid, so that you don't get aerial bacteria falling in. And then you just cool it down as quickly as you can. So you bring the water up to the sides of the pot, and then the water will get hot right around the pot, so swirl it around with your hand. And then after a while, change the water out and put in more cold water. But that's about it. And then you just wait till it gets to the cooler temperature, and that's all. So, does anybody have any more questions? Because we've done this in time. And the other thing is, don't worry about using this big a pot, because you don't have to. You can use any size pot you have. And if you just have like a saucepan like this, just you can put in some bones and make some sauce, make some stock, make some chicken soup. So, but it just won't be enough to put in the freezer and have to pull out when you have a whim to do something. So, I tend to make soups on Saturday mornings or something, and it's like, okay, so I grab my stock and then I put in whatever I want to do, and I make that batch of soup, and then I have 6 of those or 7 of those in the freezer, and then that'll last for a year or so of that kind of soup, and that way I've always got a bundle of options if I don't feel like cooking.
So I've been listening and taking notes, and it's been great. I've got a lot of really good tips, just little things, even not the main thing. I appreciate it, Gay. I noticed when I signed in, it's being recorded. Is this going to be sent out to those of us that are here? Because I'm not, she said three tablespoons of, or three bay leaves. Oh, I add that to my notes. Oh, it's, is it going to be sent out or not?
I will send you a link, but what we'll do is we'll put it on YouTube so that anybody can get to it, and you can just Google Martha Grace cooking, and it will pop up. But I will send a link, and feel free to send it to anybody. There's nothing private here. It's totally fine. So if you have anybody that you think might be interested, just go ahead and send it to them. And the other thing is, online, there is a link to last year's recording that we did. And that was of the meal with the chicken and
Green bean.
the rosemary chicken and wine and salad and green beans.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been so fun.
It's great.
Thank you, Gay.
I need to re-listen.
Learned a
Okay,
lot.
this is fabulous. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, bon appetit, huh?
Okay, we see you, Doc.